Danish health authorities raised the alarm over a mutant virus last week. The authorities had found genetic changes that they say might undermine the effectiveness of future COVID-19 vaccines. Now, more than 200 people have been infected with Mink-related coronavirus. And at least 6 countries, including Denmark, but also Spain, Sweden, Italy, the Netherlands, and the US, have reported outbreaks of coronavirus in mink farms. Denmark has announced a cull of all 17 million mink. But even if that is successful in stopping the danger, how much of a problem could virus mutations be? Well, we can now begin the discussion. I'm very pleased to say that we can welcome to Roundtable from Bath in the UK, Dr. Bharat Pankania from the University of Exeter Medical School. We cross to the west coast of the United States and welcome Dr. Anne-Marie Kimball, epidemiologist who also works with the Centre on Global Health Security at Chatham House, and with us also from Wageningen in the Netherlands, Wim van der Poel, Dutch vet who's an expert on zoonotic diseases, they being the ones that spread from animals to humans. I'm going to come to you last of all about zoonotic diseases, Wim, but first of all, let me address this question to both Bharat and Anne-Marie. Anne-Marie, you first. We've heard the supposed good news about a possible vaccine for COVID, Pfizer, the company that is supposed to be making it, and I'm sure everybody welcomes that. But if it works, would it work in a mutation such as the one we're seeing in Dutch mink? Anne-Marie?
I think that's absolutely the central question. What we know from the human cases in the Netherlands is that there seems to be some suppression of antibody production. The question is, with your new mRNA platform and the antibody production that seems so satisfactory in the Pfizer vaccine, is it going to make a difference? And I think that jury is still pretty much out. There's some evidence, obviously alarming enough, that you're seeing major culling of mink in the Netherlands and moving up the ban on mink farming. So clearly, I mean, I'm not privy to all the evidence, but I think that is the concern. It's too early
You're
to say.
right to mention the Netherlands, but it's primarily in Denmark, I think, where the mink have been affected, but it has been found in the Netherlands, Spain, Sweden, Italy, the United States. So my question then is, and Bharat, I'll come to you in just a moment, my question then is, if it might not work because of the mutation, every time we see a mutation, are we going to have to find a different vaccine?
The answer to that is probably not, because this virus has been actually mutating throughout its transmission, and that mutation process is being tracked. And what do I mean by that? I mean the sequences are being published and people are looking at that as we go along. So I don't think that's going to be the case at all. And I think, as I said, the jury is still out whether this particular mutation, which is being controlled, this particular strain, whether that in fact would have an impact on the vaccine.
And your thoughts, Bharat?
So the other thing is the science of, are you immune? And we measure, the only thing that we can measure is antibody levels. So there may be effective immune response. It's just that we are unable to measure it properly. So that's also another item to have in the equation about, does this virus produce immunity? Only time will tell, because on the one hand, we may not be able to measure antibodies, but that doesn't mean the person is not immune to it.
Tell me about this particular coronavirus in mink. It has been passed to humans. Is it as dangerous to them in that case when they're infected as the common COVID-19 that we've been seeing, or not?
Well, we don't know is the honest answer, because it is a zoonotic that is now transferring from mink to humans. It may cause the same level of illness, or it may cause a severe form of the illness. That we don't know. But thinking empirically, I don't expect it to be significantly different from the standard SARS-CoV-2 infections that is obtained from human to human transmission. Nevertheless, I'm very concerned, and our colleague on zoonosis will tell us, that we don't want this virus to become endemic in the animal population, because if it does, it will be very difficult to control it in the human population going forward.
Your cue, Wim. What do you reckon?
Yes, I agree with the former speakers. We saw, well, as my Danish colleagues, they saw a strain appearing in mink that showed the mutation in the spike protein. This is an immunodominant protein, so this protein may be involved in antibody development and also in the vaccine response to in patients. But the next question is, how dangerous is this mutation? Our Danish colleagues have seen that the antibodies developed against the in humans circulating strains seem to be less protective towards this mink strain. But they have done very few experiments. So there is more research needed to show whether this virus is more aggressive in people, let's say causing more disease, or spreads more rapidly in the human population. So there is a lot more research to do to show whether this mutant is really dangerous.
There was Barrett wondering whether this could become endemic in the animal population, by which I think he was suggesting that it could spread from mink to other animals, whether they be farmyard, captive animals, wild animals. I'm not sure. Is that a possibility?
I think that's a very good question and a very important question. Also in mink, we don't want a reservoir of this SARS coronavirus. If we have a decreasing number of infections in people and we maintain a reservoir in mink farms, that will still be a problem because all the time there will be a risk that the mink virus is transmitted to people again. So we don't want a reservoir in mink farms, but we also don't want a reservoir in other animals. So it's also important to look into other animals to see whether the virus spreads to other wildlife, for example. And also there is the possibility of spreading to other livestock. So it's important to do research in these other animals to see whether the virus is circulating there and whether it may develop a reservoir.
I'm wondering whether the culling of the mink, up to 20 million of them, and the concerns about this mutation would have even surfaced had we not had a global pandemic. In other words, do these sort of things happen naturally all the time and we don't normally notice them?
Species jumps happen all the time. So if viruses are not so pathogenic, we may not see it. But in this case, the virus is very pathogenic, and so it's very important to see whether this virus spreads in the mink population.
Barrett, let me come to you first of all. I was reading in the Financial Times just a few days ago about another mutation, one that started in Spanish farm workers. It's now said to be responsible for 80% of the new infections in the UK. How many mutations are we going to see? And if we can't control them, can we control the disease at all?
Oh, I would be quite relaxed about it. You have to look at it like this, as a tree with many, many branches. It is still a tree. And as long as it is many branches belonging to the one tree, and it continues to express what we call the spike proteins against which we are making immunity and antibodies too, we will be able to tackle it. Furthermore, if there is a big change in the spike protein, it may be a very good change, for example, meaning the spike protein can now no longer attach to human receptors and therefore infect and cause infection and disease in humans. So it is a normal course, it's a natural history of these RNA viruses whereby they make mistakes in replication. And the good news is most of these mistakes are in our favor. So that's the way to look at it. And we will get what we would call a predominant strain. So that would be the main branch of a tree that becomes
and that's the one strain. That's the one that we're mostly having to deal with. Anne-Marie, I know you are concerned about mutations, but the general sense I'm getting is that they are inevitable. There's not very much we can do about them. We just need to keep our eyes open for the ones that are particularly nasty.
Yes, I think the best analogy would be bird flu, H5N1, when it emerged in Southeast Asia. We saw widespread culling of poultry, and that was to reduce the threat of mutation of a very pathogenic virus. It was not nearly as transmissible to humans as this virus is, but it had a high mortality rate. And so you saw the same the same approach, which was basically extensive culling of poultry to reduce your reservoir. I completely agree. These RNA viruses, they will continue to mutate. And I also agree that as they mutate and as they transmit, they usually become more infectious, but they very rarely become more lethal than what they had been previously. They generally attenuate, and that's the good news. So I would go along with the other speakers on that.
If we don't live in such proximity to animals, if we don't eat the wrong animals, etc., if we don't farm minks, this would prevent zoonotic diseases spreading, would it not?
Yes, I agree that contacts with animals, changing contacts with animals, changing livestock management will change our contacts with animals, and that may increase zoonotic infections. So especially when you keep animals together with other animals, which normally wouldn't meet in nature, you may increase the risk of species jumps. So it's very important to really look into the way we are dealing or keeping animals.
And what about the irony in the fact that most of the mink that are farmed in Denmark end up in China?
Yeah, that's true. Most of the mink is exported to China. On the other hand, there is also a lot of fur production in China. Not only mink, but also raccoon dogs. And raccoon dogs may also be susceptible to SARS coronavirus too. So I think it's very important to keep screening or monitoring animals like raccoon dogs and also minks to see whether there are introductions of SARS coronavirus.
I know there's so much more to say. I'm going to have to draw a line under it. But listen, thank you very much indeed, Bharat, Amory, and Wim. Thank you very much indeed for your expertise and your time.
Thank you.